Time to do some Amiga stuff, and this 500 plus, which was donated back in December of last year by Neil of NLK Media. Well, like all these machines, this one needs a little bit of love to bring it back. And what do I mean by that? Well, like most Amiga 500s, this one has suffered the dreaded battery rot. But unlike some other 500s that we've looked at in the past, this one actually doesn't look that bad. The majority of the corrosion is limited to just this location here where the battery originally was. That was removed by Neil before he sent the machine to me, and probably just removed in the nick of time. Yes, I do think there will be some damage here to repair, but it is limited to just that area. There's maybe a little bit of greening on Gary there. We'll take him out of a socket in a minute for a closer look, but the rest of the board looks really clean. Sometimes you would see that corrosion spreading as far as the knees, but no, everything else, as I say, it all looks grand. So we're just going to be following the usual sort of procedure. We'll remove all the socketed chips anyway, just to reseat them all. They've all been sitting in there for, what, 30 years? So it doesn't do any harm to pull them out, a little bit of contact cleaner, just reseat them. Then I think we'll just remove the components in this immediate area. Obviously the remnants of the old battery, they'll come off. I'll remove the two 244s, the two 373s. Not that those two look to have any corrosion on them, it's mostly limited to those two. And I think we'll just remove these couple of passives here as well. That'll just give us good access to clean and test everything. And so let's start with Gary himself. Just how crispy is this socket going to be? Yeah, he is in there nice and tight. Generally a sign that the corrosion has taken hold here. But if we just slowly work it back and forward on either side, he should come out of bed. It's one side out. There's the other side. And yeah, just a little bit of corrosion there. That will be easily enough dealt with. The socket itself certainly isn't the worst I've seen. We haven't lost any of the teeth in the socket. But I do have a couple of nice clean spares. So I think to save any hassle, we'll just pull that out as well and swap that at the same time. Time to warm up the Moo gun. While we're waiting though, we can go ahead and remove these other socketed ICs. So Paula, Denise, or ECS Super Denise as it is in the 500 plus. The odd and even CIAs are Kickstart ROM version 2.04. This was the first of the wedge machines to ship with the version 2 workbench. The brains of the operation, the infamous Motorola 68000 that seemed to power more or less every machine of this era, well, unless it had an IBM badge on the front. And Fat Agnes, which on the A500 Plus is the 8375 flavour. That one supports 2 megabytes of chip RAM, although I'll need a different tool to get that out of there. I need this, the PLCC chip extractor. I really do not like this tool. The amount of times this has slipped on me, causing damage to these components as they come out. But luckily enough, this time it seems to have removed Agnes without any issues. Well, I say that, I did manage to bend that one pin ever so slightly, but I should be able just to tweak it with my nail here back into position. There we are. So I like to just mark the board on the underside just to remind myself what we're going to remove. So I'm going to take Gary's socket off. That's all the pins either side of that line. I'm going to remove the passives here that were just beside the negative side of the battery. We'll remove these passives here that just sat above the battery. And we're going to remove the 373 in that position and the 244 in that position. I don't think I'll bother pulling those other two off because I don't really see the point. Taking a closer look at the legs on them, they're hardly corroded at all. So we'll pull those two off first, give them a bit of a tidy up and test them in the TL866. If they're both fine, these two will both be fine. Before we start sucking though, a little bit of fresh solder, just to help things get moving. As per usual, when I'm working on one of these boards, that pin connected to that large trace there, just not sure this second if that is ground or VCC, but that one has not desoldered successfully. So I will need to revisit that a bit later on. Although that one that's beside it, with no large traces, that has desoldered fine. As per usual, I'm running the Duratool desoldering gun here at 400 degrees. Just hold the gun on the leg for a couple of seconds to melt the solder, and then suck. So just 3 pins on Gary that wouldn't let go, although it is pretty easy to deal with. Just go in with some more fresh solder. And if we take the desoldering gun again, but with the iron as well this time, just to help heat the area. We'll heat the pin, drop the desoldering gun over it, and that has cleared fine. So all being well, that should be the socket now free. Yep, there it is. And I suppose, yes, you can make the argument that it's not that bad in there. You know, a little bit of white vinegar and IPA might have cleaned that up, but definitely worth removing it just so we can deal with all the corrosion underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll remove those passives, that cap, the remnants of the battery, and those two 7-4 logic chips. Then we can start assessing the damage. Okay, that's everything removed, and you can see that I've also taken off the trapdoor edge connector just because this thing was looking a little bit green as well. This will get a bath in some white vinegar and that should bring that back. The 244 and the 373 though, those are actually quite difficult to remove. Even after desoldering on the bottom side, there was enough solder on the top side that was holding them firm to the board. So all I did in the end was put plenty of flux around them and then just go along the side of them with a little bit of braid. And that was enough to free them up, and then they came out okay. But the 244 in particular, that was in that position, that is the chip there, and you can see underneath it there is quite a bit of corrosion. So before we worry about trying to clean this up, let's quickly put it into the TL866 and let's see if it works. So in XG Pro, we click on that button. We're searching for 74244 and let's test it. Yeah, despite how it looks, that chip is okay. So we'll drop that into the vinegar bath as well, and that should hopefully get rid of all that nastiness. Since we're testing things though, let's try the 373. 373, test, and no, that has failed. Although possibly just a bad connection in here, so let's try that again and then hold it in here at the same time. And yeah, no, that's okay. The problem is the legs on these have all been cut after they were soldered into the board. They've all been trimmed down, and this thing has had so much use that sometimes you just get a bit of a flaky connection. So that one is good as well. It can go into the vinegar bath at the same time as those other bits. So into the vinegar goes that pin header, and those two components. We may as well stick the old socket in there as well, just to see how that comes up. I will put that to the side, and then we'll just take a cup full of vinegar and chuck that onto the board and give it all a scrub with the toothbrush. I'll just leave it to soak for a few minutes, then we'll rinse it all off with IPA. Alright, that's been a couple of minutes, and you can almost see there where it has sort of frothed up a little bit, where it's been reacting with what's on the board. Just pat it down with a cloth first, and then we'll give it the same treatment with IPA. There's hardly anything left in this bottle, so let's pour that out. And we'll just work this in with the toothbrush as well. Again, I'll just take the worst off then with the cloth, and then we'll give it a quick going over with some cotton buds, and we can start to assess the damage. So yeah, it's not looking too bad. A little bit of the solder mask did come off there, but that was expected. It was all bubbled. Although we are going to have to go ahead and remove any of the black solder mask on this. That's heavily corroded. If we left it like that, even if the trace underneath is fine, well, despite the fact that we give it all a bath, there's still a chance that there is corrosion in there, and it will only get worse, causing problems in the future. Now, anytime you've seen me do that before, I've used a fiberglass pen, but I want to try and do something a little bit different today. I want to try using my Dremel to be a bit more accurate, going over these traces that show signs of corrosion, to just try and remove the solder mask on them directly, rather than scrubbing the whole area. I've just put a small grinding bit on this, and because I've never done this before on a PCB, I think we'll just start at this large ground plane here, just to see how the board reacts to this. So yeah, I do think this is going to work fine. Although it is going to take me a while. I'm just try going over one of the traces there, one of the fine traces, just to see how that reacts. And again, yeah, that seems to be doing the job. So I've got an awful lot of this to do. Leave it with me, and we'll be back once I have all that copper exposed. Well, that's it all done, but to be honest with you, I'm not really sure if that is any better than just using the fiberglass pen. I would say that I think this method is slightly more harsh. Definitely is a lot quicker. I mean, that only took me 10 minutes, whereas with the fiberglass pen, I've seen me at it for half an hour, maybe longer. But I think just the fact that this is a rotary tool, it is just naturally going to be harsher on it. But it has exposed a little bit of damage here that we now need to repair. Just here where the battery was, at the negative side of the battery, there are 4 traces that pass there underneath it, and all 4 of them are split. But there is a little bit of damage elsewhere. There is a trace here that has been disconnected from that hole at pin 12 of the 244, and I think there's another one up there, which would be pin 18. But before we start running any patch wires, the first thing to do is coat all of this copper. I'm going to drag some solder over all of this, just using a little bit of braid. That'll just help to protect it all, but also give us something to work to when running our patch wires. Now that we have the solder on there, it is a bit easier to see where breaks are. and the damage on this board is considerably more than I had initially thought. In fact, this could be one of the worst boards that we've ever looked at for damage. Definitely would not have thought that when looking at this initially. But there are multiple broken tracks all over the place. So we do have our work cut out for us. But there's nothing we can't do. It's just going to take a bit longer than I thought. The board is a mess of flux at the minute though, so let me tidy all that up. And then we'll take a look at what is broken. Yeah, this is a complete horror show. I took a photo of this area just using my phone, just so we can look at it on the computer and zoom in. But there are broken traces everywhere. And to be honest with you, I can't see this purely just being down to the battery leakage. I think the lesson here is do not use a Dremel to try and clean the top of a board. But let's take a look at that photo. And apologies for the glare on it, but this is it here. And if we start just down at the battery itself, well, it's pretty obvious to see there where those 4 traces themselves have let go. Because we've got a break there, a break there, break there, and a break there. We then have a further break on the other side of the negative terminal, just at that point. And then if we move along towards where the 244 was, well, there's a large trace running down here. I'm not sure what it's carrying, to be honest. In fact, it must be ground. Yeah, that must be a ground trace. But as you can see, that is quite badly eaten away. So we will need to make that good. Plus, that is also picking up pin 10 of the 244 itself. But on that IC, yeah, there are broken traces everywhere. So pin 9, that is broken. 8, that looks like it might be broken, not sure. Just let me check it with the multimeter. And no, that one actually is okay. 7 looks fine. 6 looks kind of dodgy as well. But no, it seems to be okay. 5 looks okay, or well, maybe not. The top bit of 5 might be broken. But no, it does seem to be okay. 4 looks okay. 3 looks a little bit dodgy. But no, it's fine. 2 and 1, they both look fine. On the other side of the chip then, pin 11. No, it seems to be okay. It's connected to the trace beside it, fine. But pin 12 there, it's definitely not. 13, that's also broken. 14 looks okay. 15 is definitely broken. 16 looks okay. It looks like it's connected on the right hand side there, but there is slight damage just to the through hole. But it should be alright. 17, well, that's definitely broken. As is 18 by the looks of it. 19, no, it's okay. And 20 is just through to the other side of the board. But there's more. There's a trace over here coming from the positive side of C813. Comes down here beside this large ground plane, and then it's supposed to continue from there down following that sort of line and connect to that position there at D911, I think that is. But as you can see, a large section of that trace is missing. So we'll need to put something in there. And then I just noticed this, but there's a hole supposed to be through the board at that point. I think there's a resistor goes through the board between there and there. And just on this side, it is looking a little bit dodgy, so I'm going to stick a wire down through that as well. The rest of it is a bit of a mess still, but I think everything else is good. I'm sure somebody spots something that looks a bit iffy and is probably shouting it at the screen right now, but I can't really see anything else. These holes here, They're all very heavily corroded, but they're all making connectivity on the other side. The traces going to them are on the other side of the board, so that's okay. I'm not too worried about the top side in that scenario. Down towards the 373, everything looks fine. There's no real signs of damage down there. So, okay, assuming that everything I've marked up there is all we actually need to repair, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 patch wires to install. Yeah, I'm fairly sure this is the worst A500 Plus that we have come across yet. I'm going to be using the wrapping wire just to repair the traces on the top side of the board here, or in so much as we can anyway. Might get kind of tricky, especially in this location when there's so many side by side. But we'll see how we get on. If need be, we can always run a few patch wires on the bottom side of the board as well. So for the likes of repairing a trace where that is split, well, if we take that one there from that capacitor down to this point, so we need to install the wire from the remnants of that trace there to the remnants of the trace there. We'll put a bit of flux on the board on either side, and we'll try to add a little bit of solder to the ends of both these traces. I managed to put a blob of solder onto that large ground plane there, so just let me tidy that up. Then strip back a little bit of the sheath on this wire. Put a little bit of solder on the tip of the iron, and let's see if I can get this stuck down. Okay, I think that's us onto the trace, but I'm not particularly happy with that because the bit of the trace that we have just soldered onto has now lifted off the board. So look, I'm going to cut that. And let's try that again. Now slightly further back the trace. Okay, that's a lot better now. That's our wire made off there. Although granted, yes, I have again put a blob of solder on that ground plane. The tip of my iron is maybe just a little bit big for what I'm trying to do here, but we'll make do. So I'm going to try and route that wire roughly in the direction of where the trace was before it vanished on us. Needs to go something like that. I put a little bit of flux on the end of it. Then the heat of the iron itself should be enough just to roll the sheath back a little bit, exposing the inner core. Just like that, and then I need to try and get it stuck down. Okay, I think that's us. Let's just confirm we have connectivity now with the multimeter. So from the positive leg of that cap down to that position, yeah, that's all good. Let's just be sure we haven't bridged anything anywhere. And no bridges that I can see. Well, it's a new day. I am just taking my time with this, and we've got quite a few patch wires on, but still quite a few to go. So there's the original one that you've seen, then patched that point, just at that point there. But while doing that, I noticed that the trace that was running down here, it had delaminated itself from the board. So just cut away the bit that was loose and replaced it with that bit of wire. We have patched those four, just with the one being closest to the negative leg of the battery. I just left the sheath on that. All the other ones though, for all the length of them, I just took the sheath off the wire, and then the one on the other side of the negative terminal at the battery, that's been patched as well. So it's just the stuff around the 244 and that large ground trace there. But looking at that, well, this large one beside it, which is VCC or 5 volt, well, it looks kind of badly eaten through just at that point as well. So I think what I'll do is just patch both of those large traces, just in case that would, maybe burn through or something on us, just where it is weakened there. because I dare say that is carrying 5 volt down to the bottom of the board here. So to patch both those points, I'm just going to use a bit of a leg of a resistor. Just want something a bit heavier on those. So I'll just cut that in half and essentially solder that on. Something like that. In fact, that's maybe a bit long, is it? That's a bit better for length. Let's see if I can get it stuck down. Okay, I think that's pretty good at that. For the other one then, at the ground trace, I'm going to try and position this so that when the 244 is in its position there, that the ground leg of it will be resting up against this sort of patch wire that we're putting in, and I can solder it to that when it's in there. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. For repairing these points here, then just on the chip where the trace has come away from the hole, I'm just going to take a bit of the wrapping wire there and just expose the inner core of it. I'll stick that down through the hole and then bend it to position on this side, and then just solder it onto the trace at this point only. When we insert the chip, I'll then pick up the wire on the other side and just make it all off at that point. Well, it's now 1 week later, and as you can see, more or less everything is now back together. All we've got left to do is repopulate the chipset and test it. We will of course need to fit a new battery holder here as well to get the real-time clock working again. But why has it taken me a week to get to this point? Well, unfortunately the human lurgy caught up with me again. I managed to get COVID again, and this time it absolutely knocked me off my feet. Was able to do a bit of soldering while suffering from that, but could not have recorded. My voice more or less totally went, and in fact if my voice goes a bit croaky while recording this section, well, you know why. So after fitting the 15 patch wires, yes, we did show 14 originally, but remember the trace here broke on me, so 15 in total. Well, we've repopulated all the passives. They're all new, barring 2 resistors, which I had to recover, 2 27 ohm resistors, because I don't have any new ones left. I'll have to order some. But there's nothing wrong with the old ones. In fact, there was nothing really wrong with any of the old passives. I was able to clean them up okay, but for the pence that they are, everything is new. We have our new socket for Gary, and 2 new sockets here where the logic chips were. I was debating whether to put sockets here or not. To be honest with you, I usually wouldn't, but just given the amount of patch wires, in particular around the 244, well, if I was to solder that old chip directly back into the board, and say that failed in a couple of months' time, getting that back out of there again would more or less mean having to redo all those patch wires, just because they are so short. When applying the heat to it to desolder it again in the future, if I had to, I can more or less guarantee you that all those patch wires would come off. So easier just to put the socket in there, and then I can swap it out in the future. And in fact, maybe just as well, because I was buzzing around all this with the multimeter again after fitting the sockets, and noticed that I missed 1 patch wire. So 15 in total, 14 of them are on the top, and that one is on the bottom. Yes, the bottom of the board still needs a bit of a clean. But I am dying to know if this will work, so let's get it repopulated and let's test it. I was going to give everything a blast with the contact cleaner, wasn't I? So Agnes first. Then we'll do the ROM. Obviously when fitting the ROM in here, pin 1 is to the top left, but you miss out the top row of pins, as denoted by those arrows either side of the socket. CPU next. Then the knees. The two CIAs, and it doesn't matter which socket you put either of these in, they are interchangeable, as I said earlier. Paula, and this is where I always get mixed up. Which one is Paula, which one is Gary? 8364, I'm fairly sure that one's Paula. And then the 5719, that is Gary. And in fact, yes, it must be, because I can see there where I've cleaned up those legs. Will this work? I genuinely have no idea. In fact, it won't work very well unless I fit those two, will it? So the 244 and the 373. One possible issue that we might face if this doesn't work is those two chips with their legs being cut short. They just don't make the best contact in those sockets, but they're in there. So let's see if it works. 15 patch wires. I've never done that much repair before. I don't know if it's going to work. So power and video hooked up, that'll do for now. I've got the power brick on my knee here so I can switch it off quickly just in case things go bang. Let's see what's going to happen. Come on. Grey screen, white screen. It's working! I do not believe it. No way! 15 patch wires, but it's working. Well, it started, and that is certainly a good sign. Let's hook up a floppy drive and let's try and run Amiga test kit. So Amiga test kit is on this disk, but we won't insert it fully for now. Let's just leave it hanging like that. We'll power up again and see if floppy drive even tries to seek. Software failure. Oh no. Let's try that again. Just make sure everything is seated properly here. That ROM did pop back into its socket a little bit there. Okay, started this time. Maybe that ROM just wasn't fully inserted. And yes, I can hear the floppy drive clicking away there. It is looking for a disk, so let's give it one. And Amiga test kit has came up. Well, we start with a memory test. Let's just test the 1 megabyte of chip RAM on this. Okay, that's been run a few times and it's fine. I will give it a burn-in test when we're finished with everything else. But for now, looking good. Controller ports. Mouse, left and right button, that works okay. Joypad port, that seems to work fine as well. Audio. Yeah, that sounds good. The low pass filter. You might be able to tell a difference in the video, but yeah, I can hear that is definitely working. In fact, if I turn that on and go across to the square wave, yeah, that's fine. Video certainly looks good, but let's just take a look at the RGB gradient. And yeah, that looks fine to me. CIA and chipset. We'll test the CIA timers anyway. And all tests passed. Real-time clock. No clock detected. That's the real-time clock chip there. Surely this should work if there's no battery there. I mean, it doesn't need the battery for the real-time clock to work, does it? I don't think it does. So that is something else that maybe needs a bit of investigation. We'll have to test the traces coming from that chip and maybe check that crystal as well. And then the serial and parallel tests for those we need the dongles. I'm sure it wouldn't do any harm trying to plug these in with the board live, but let's not take any chances, will we? I've just powered that off there. Let's get back into test kit and check those ports. 3 LEDs have lit up, so we know all our voltages are okay. And the Amiga has started again fine this time. That's software failure. Not really sure what it was, other than maybe that chip not being fully inserted properly. So serial and parallel. Serial test. Yep, that's all good. Parallel test. And yeah, that is all good as well. So almost a complete clean bill of health, apart from that real-time clock. What is going on there? So why is the real-time clock chip not working? Well, I've been having a think about it. You can see I fitted the new battery holder, and just as a diode in with that as well to stop the Amiga trying to charge the CR2032 that we will put here eventually. It's on the bottom of the board. I'll show you that in a minute. But why is it not working? Well, it seems that I might have missed another broken trace. Just here, where these 4 components are, the 2 diodes and the 2 resistors. Well, if we take a look on PCB Explorer, you can see that the top 3 components, they are connected by a trace. Well, if we test it with the multimeter, between the resistor and that first diode there, well, there is a connection. But if we go up to that other diode, well, there's no connection. So what does that mean? Well, unfortunately, that means that we have fed the guts of 11 volts into our clock chip. That component, which is only rated for a maximum of 7, we might have fried it. And I can show you that. So the board's powered up. I mean, we're not going to cause any more damage to this if we have fried it. We've fried it. And there is 10.8 volts going into it. That is 3.8 more than the specification allows. So our 12 volts in there, back through that diode that's giving us that 10.8. But at this diode here, well, VCC or 5 volt is at the cathode of it. And so a 12 volt meant to be present on the anode of it. Well, that's sort of your voltage divider as I understand. That'll be 12 volt less 5 volt, which is 7 volts. Then taking into account the loss through the 2 diodes as well, that's going to be close as be damned, 5 volts, maybe 6. And that is your VCC1, as it's called, powering this chip. Why they just didn't power this directly off VCC, I don't really know. Probably something to do with the original battery that was in here and they'd need to charge it. That bottom resistor there, that is just linked directly to the positive side of said battery. So long story short, we need to bridge those 3 solder points. Probably a little tricky to do it now on the top side, especially considering I have fitted that battery holder. So I'll just do it on the bottom side. There's that diode that I fitted to the new battery holder. But the 3 points that we need to bridge are those. Well, I suppose in reality I just need to bridge those 2, but the trace on the other side does look a bit mangled, so we'll just bridge all 3. And I'll just use a bit of the leg, actually, that was cut off that diode. Just soldered at one position there, then I'll turn it to size. End that into position. And then solder it at the opposite end. And then pick up the bit in the middle. Now we now have 5.3 volts down at the clock chip. That is what it should be, but does it work? Okay, does the clock chip now work? So Amiga still boots up, that's good. No more gurus. We're into Amiga test kit and real-time clock. Yeah, that does seem to be working now. Chip is detected, although it currently thinks it is the 1st of January 2016. Just a little bit out. How about we try and set the date and time? Although to try and remember that, we are going to have to put in a battery. Probably shouldn't do that with the machine powered on, but it's done now. So let's set the date and time. It is 2024. It is July. Too far. It is currently the 20th of July. And that time, well, it's only out by 15 minutes. Yes, it is just the early hours of the 20th. So let's save and exit. We'll power down the Amiga. And let's give it a few minutes to see if it remembers that. But I suppose one thing we can do while we're waiting, let's just see what sort of voltage we're getting on the clock chip from the battery. And I did measure this before putting it in just to be sure that, you know, it was good battery, and it is. It's outputting about 3.3 volts or just slightly under. But if you measure it on the clock chip itself, VCC is there, that one's ground. And yeah, okay, 3.1, thereabouts. We are getting a little bit of loss because of the diode in there, but that's fine. That should be enough to keep that clock chip working happily. Okay, it's been a couple of minutes. That should be enough for, if this wasn't working, for it to forget the time. Back in the test kit, real-time clock, and yeah, that's fine. It is working grand. I think that is more or less one now full, clean bill of health for this 500 plus. Well, it's all back in the case. It's currently running Shadow of the Beast, and it all seems to be working perfectly. I really could not be happier with how this turned out, considering the extent of that damage in the end. 15 patch wires. That is definitely a first for me, although let's be honest, how many of those are down to the battery corrosion? How many of those are down to my experimental technique of using a Dremel? Yeah, not be doing that again, but at least it is working now. So thanks again to Neil for sending this to me. It is brilliant to have an A500 Plus back in my collection. I actually sold my last one of them. And to be truthful, sort of regretted that decision ever since getting rid of it. But having this one now, I could not be happier. So yeah, thank you so much, Neil. The case probably could use a little bit of tidying up. I have just given it a quick wipe over with a cloth, but it does need a proper deep clean. And the keyboard, yeah, it has taken a bit of yellowing, hasn't it? So that could use a bit of retro brightening at some point in the future, but to be honest, I'm not particularly fussed about that. If I can get it sparkle clean, I can put up with the yellowing. That said though, definitely not the last time you're going to see this machine, because I do have a couple of expansions lined up for it, although that is for the next video, or well, the next couple of videos. So why not hit subscribe to make sure you don't miss those. As for this one though, that is gonna be it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Well, it does do a good job, but I've so much PCB dust up my nose, I could probably sneeze out an expansion at this point. Oh, 8 megabytes of gotta go fast RAM for the Amiga 500. That'll come in handy. Although I'm not sure why it came out red. Maybe I need to speak to my doctor. 555 SNORKERS.
Dr. Snorker's office, how can I service you today?
I need to speak to the doctor urgently. I can't stop sneezing.
Oh my, that does sound terrible. I'll put you straight through. Yes?
Dr. Stalkers, I keep sneezing up little red things.
Little red things, that does sound bad.
I was working on an Amiga 500 and grinding at it. The dust got up my nose, and you won't believe it, but I sneezed out a gotta go fast RAM expansion.
Ah, that's nothing to worry about. But if you start sneezing out Atari expansions, call back immediately. Nurse, I'm ready for my bed bath.
Good old Dr. Snorkers. He always sees me, right? Oh no, not again. But don't worry, this one's for the Amiga too.